would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, a member of the National Association of Realtors. But please don't hold that against me. I hope everyone out there is doing well. Once again, we've got a few interesting things to touch on today. And I think it's probably appropriate to give you an update on what's going on with my own real estate stuff. So we'll touch on that a little bit. As always, the absolute best way to get in touch with me is through the website at therebelbroker.com. From there, you can click on the contact button to send me a message, or you can also click on the big red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to Support the Show. Participating, you're supporting the show, helping me out. But in exchange, you are putting yourself in a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. We've already given out $150 over the last 3 months to three different listeners. Congratulations to them. Good luck to all of you who are currently still in the mix and those who add yourselves to the list by clicking on that button, providing the same email address both times you're asked, and then answering a handful of questions. And then you are entered and good to go. And we'll be doing that drawing early in January, so stay tuned for that. If you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, just text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's the word Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222. And of course, if you've got a couple of extra minutes in your day, whether you're using iTunes or anything else, give the show a review, some stars, thumbs, whatever it is that you use on the means that you use to consume the show. And that would be dramatically appreciated. That's also something that helps boost the visibility of the show on the different outlets where it's consumed by having audience participation on that way. So thanks to all of you who've already done it. And thanks to all of you who will take some time out sometime in the next few days to maybe join in yourselves. So let's go ahead and touch on my stuff first. I guess that makes sense. I don't think I've really spelled out the nitty gritty. I've talked about my general plan of selling my place, using that money to acquire another place for me to live in, and then using some of the money that comes out of that to purchase an investment property. And I had this great schedule. I had this, I very much over planned. I had come up, and this is what I suggest you folks do whenever you're looking to market your property, is to go through your property and try to look at it with a third person's view. What's wrong with your house? And in all honesty, I've got a few things that, in order to make my house as marketable as possible, need to change. So everything from outside landscaping to getting an interior paint job to upgrading the kitchen and upgrading the master bathroom and doing a complete remodel, really, of the master bathroom and a complete remodel of the kitchen. It still has the original cabinets from when the home was built in 1975. So none of the cool gliding closing drawers that have the silent soft close, none of the things that you'd want really in a modern kitchen. So those are all things that are on my list of things to do. I've been accumulating my list sort of in the back of my head, calculating how much all of this effort is going to cost me. And there's a rather long list of little things that I want to do. So I've had that going, and I've already talked with the contractor. I'm already getting bids on some window replacement, a few different things. And done the math to figure out if it ends up making me more money than it costs me. And indeed it does, to a pretty substantial tune, actually. It ends up making me twice what I would spend on this work. So it's absolutely an effective investment of resources in terms of then being able to sell it for quite a bit more. But here's the downside that I think can happen. There's always a wrinkle, right? There's always something that jumps in and screws with the best laid plans. And in my case, it's finding a property that fits my needs, that is right where I want it to be, has the lot size I want, has the number of bedrooms I want. We actually discussed this property a few weeks back. It is the property that whoever did the limited remodel they did it absolutely badly. Different rooms have different cheap laminate floors, so there's not even a consistent laminate flooring throughout the house. And then, of course, overall, it's all the absolute cheapest Home Depot stuff you can get. Somebody did a very goofy kitchen semi kind of sort of remodel on the absolute cheap. And the end result is the flooring, some of the wall coverings, even some of the walls have been covered with wood paneling. What's even nuttier is this was done recently. This isn't something somebody did in the 70s or 80s because that was a style choice then. That's something someone did now. I'm actually wondering what might be under that paneling. It seems to me like that the only reason someone would do that today would be either they're absolutely disconnected from what anybody wants to buy or they're hiding something. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's water damage or something on the other side of that paneling. But in any event, that's the property that I'm looking at. And I'm looking at it for its bones at this point, realizing that I'd pretty much have to strip it out in order to make it the way I want it to be, which is fine. But right now the price is very unrealistic based on that. And we had a chat about that it was about $100,000 overpriced. Since we last talked, it has actually come down in price by about $50,000. It's been dropping about $10,000 to $15,000 each time they've been dropping it. And it's finally now getting to the point where there is a decent possibility that I could get it at the price I want. And then after I do the work I would want to do to it, the home would then be worth substantially more than what I've paid. So why is that great? And why in general is this not just, it's not just because you're paying less for the property on paper. Here in California, one big thing for me is trying to get properties at the lowest price or at least on paper, the lowest price, so that my tax basis is lower. Here in California, we have Prop 13 that limits the property taxes to 1% of the assessed value of the home with a maximum increase per year. So as long as the increases per year in property values keep pace or exceed that amount, we're actually artificially keeping the amount we're being taxed for relatively suppressed, right? So obviously when there was the downturn, that threw everything into a crazy situation because everyone was petitioning to get their homes reassessed for the new value. And so tax rolls were dropping like flies because suddenly property taxes weren't as profitable for this county as it once was. That's a side point. So a few other things, and one thing that's a news item for today is the Federal Reserve changing the prime rate, and we already called that. If you didn't hear it here first, you probably heard it somewhere else. There was absolutely no question that we were going to see a raise in rates today, and we did at about the rate we figured. In fact, I think we called it. I think we suggested it was going to be a 1/4 point increase, and what did we get? A 1/4 point increase. So what do you do when your circumstances indicate you need to move sooner on a sale? In my case, I have two possible solutions to this problem. One is I hasten my bringing my home to market. And the way I do that, and obviously I can't get the work done faster that I was planning to do. I wasn't planning on having to put this thing on the market till late April. And then May is historically when the highest price for homes that get sold is highest in May. So my goal was to be right in the market right at that time, right to hit the sweet spot. So what I need to do now is accelerate that process in order to potentially get the property that I want. Now, remember, one of the rules I have is there'll always be another property. So I'm not so married to this that I'm going to let it influence me enough to make stupid decisions. But here's what I do. I look at the property as it exists right now, and I figure how much could I sell this home for right now without doing any work to it. So I did the calculations. I calculated how much it was going to cost to do the revamping that I wanted to do. And I basically went on Craigslist, and I wasn't interested in getting because this is absolutely something where I've got various plans. So I'm not married to this idea of selling it for less than I could after the work is done. But I went ahead and gave all the important information about the property. I didn't provide the address. I didn't provide any photos, but I gave the layout and I gave an explanation of why I was doing it and why it would be beneficial to someone for us to put the deal together this way. So you may ask, well, Robert, why are you doing it the way you're doing it? Because through this initial offer, I'm offering it without having to pay any commissions to anyone. So in order for me to save money myself, I'm saying, here's the work that would be done. Here's the amount of money you'd have to invest to make this property worth X. I'm offering it for this. So basically, you would instantly enjoy $100,000 in additional value in the property after you've purchased it and done all the work that I planned on doing. But the difference being, all the work would be getting done to your specifications. The kitchen would look the way you want it to look. The master bathroom would look the way you want it to look. The paint would be the color you choose. The windows would be the way you want them to be. The other 2 bathrooms would get the upgrades you want them to get or not get them. If you decide to spend less or do less, that's entirely up to you. And in exchange, what you're getting is a lower tax basis for the property because you'd be buying it for about $200,000 below what it would normally sell for. So your taxes are going to be less, and then the amount of accrues will not keep up with the amount the home increases. So you'll be in a much better situation there. And you'll also be buying it, if you're going to get a loan, the odds are you'll be getting a better interest rate by doing it now. So that was what I put out there. And I did this about 2 days ago, and I've gotten 3 or 4 responses from folks who wanted to get a little bit more information, wanted to get the actual address, and wanted to get photos. So I've been responding to those folks as they replied, and what I've been doing is just verifying that I could confirm who they were. They were providing me with their name, and they were giving me phone numbers. So I was able to sort of do a little quick detective work. And for every person, I've been able to verify that they are a real person who really has the phone number, and it really goes to their name. So all's great. And I'm waiting to hear back from some of those folks on that transaction. The net result would be that I'd sell this thing much faster, and then I could potentially coordinate it with the purchase of the property that I'm interested in, and everything would be fine. But there's also 2 more plans. The next plan is to simply do what I was always planning to do, not worry about whether or not I can get this property, and just keep plugging along and doing what I'm doing. It would end up with me having more money in my pocket, but it would be slightly less convenient. Third option is to approach the current owner of the property that I like. Now, as you recall, this is something we've talked about months ago. So this property has been on the market for a while. I checked, and it has been on the market for far longer than the average for the city of Morgan Hill, far more than the average for homes of that size and square footage, and far longer than any property in that neighborhood in the last year. So clearly there are issues, and I can use that to my advantage, which means 2 things. If they're getting very close to their price, I could potentially offer them their asking price, but then make the terms more beneficial for me. Or I can go with a more conventional offer, but offer them less money than they're currently asking for. To be honest, what I'm probably going to do is to combine the 2 things, and here's how I'm going to make it work. I am going to make an offer that includes a lease option. And remember, we've talked about lease options. I think I did a lease option show nearly a year ago now. It may have been really in the first few months that I went to a daily show. But I love lease options. I think lease options are fantastic. The problem is it tends to scare the crap out of sellers and agents. I'll bet less than 2% of agents out there have ever actually filled out a lease option addendum to an offer and are not really that sure of even what the hell it means. So there's going to have to be a moment when I sit down and explain to the people involved, particularly their agent, exactly what I'm shooting for. Now, I can't recall the name of the agent who holds this listing. I don't remember recognizing the name. Normally, when I recognize the name, I can make a guess in my head as far as how savvy they'll be relating to what I'm going to be talking to them about. But I usually like to have these conversations with them in person. So what might be appropriate is to ask them to meet me at the house and me suggest my suggestion and see where we can go. So here's what my layout would be. And we have to remember that at this point that we have to understand what the seller's motivations are. The seller is bleeding cash. So they have a need to stop bleeding cash. Whether they have paid off their mortgage and they own that house free and clear or not does not matter. There are still property taxes that are being paid every month. They still have to have the water on and the electric on. So they're paying a certain amount of money every single month on this property. So I would offer them a lease option where I would come up with a rental amount that I would pay, which I would probably make somewhere in the neighborhood of between $2,500 and $3,000. I would also include a statement relating to some amount of each monthly payment contributing to the initial down payment once that time comes, just because. And then give myself, I think at the lowest, I'd give myself at least 6 months to potentially exercise the option, or I think I'd start with asking for a year. Now, there's no way I want to do this for a year, but it lets me ask for more than I really need, and then potentially through negotiation back up to a position that still fills my needs, but it also does give me enough buffer to get accomplished what I want to get accomplished. So what I do at that point is I now have access to this property. I can allow the home that I've been living in be totally dedicated to the contractors going to be doing the work. I don't need to be worried about having access to my bathroom or not having access to my bathroom, or being able to cook in the kitchen or not being able to cook in the kitchen. I have this place that I can be lease optioned in and move from there. Now, this gives me some advantages. One, all this is a commitment to exercise the option at some point, and if I don't, I lose any deposit funds or any rents that I've paid to the seller. The seller comes out with a little bit more money in their pocket, but they're then stuck with trying to sell the property again if I don't exercise the option, and then I can just move out. What's great is if I negotiate a price today and we agree on it and we do a lease option and I see that the values just keep going up and up and up, that means I'm suddenly buying a house now at a discounted price from the current market value. If things go down dramatically, I don't have to exercise my option. I can back away and I can move on to some other property. So it's really a great scenario for me. It satisfies the needs of the seller who owns this property that just isn't selling. And I totally know why it's not selling. It does not show well at all. Someone has to go in there recognizing they have to go in and gut the place and spend a ton of money to bring it up to really a decent livability level. But as I said, the location is fantastic. So, and it has, as I said before, it also has everything that I want in a property. So it's a unique opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and try that out. I'll let you know what happens with me suggesting a lease option to the listing agent. My guess is initially is going to be no, but I'm going to have to try and sweeten it up and make it feel good so that we can potentially do that. But I like all the problems it solves. It lets me still walk away with maximum money. It lets me lock in a price at winter prices, but not have to execute on that price until summer prices. And it also lets me more effectively and in a more timely way deal with the upgrades of the property that I'm currently living in. And for all intents and purposes, it's really costing me very little. It's costing me what I'm having to pay in rent. And if I do have to come up with a deposit amount, there may be some amount of a deposit. I would probably try to make that offer without including a deposit and just have it be a rental amount. But again, I'd be willing to negotiate some amount of that. Here's the other part of the equation. Where do you get the funds for this stuff? Well, in this case, what I'll probably be doing, and I've already made a couple of calls today, is getting a home equity line of credit to manage all of these various expenses relating to this transaction. So it's getting access to funds without having to pay a ridiculous interest rate. So I'm not using credit cards that are going to have, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20% interest. I'll be able to get decent interest rates. But of course, in my case, I have enough equity in my home that's going to be an okay thing to get. And I realize that for a lot of folks who aren't in that position, it may make it a little bit more difficult. So what would I do in a different scenario? Well, if you know someone who has the cash that you need, you could do the same thing, but then say, not only will I pay you back, I'll pay you back with X amount of interest once I sell my property after I've updated it and upgraded it and completed the sale. So you'd have to enter into sort of a third-party agreement there, but that would be another way. That would be a way I would have gone if I didn't have quite as much equity in the property as I currently do. Okay. So that's sort of the layout of the land right now. It's the best laid plans of mice and men, having a little bit of a wrinkle thrown in. But I actually kind of like this wrinkle. It makes it a little bit more interesting and potentially makes it a higher profit position for me to get this lease option thing to go. But we'll just have to see how much we can get the seller to agree to in terms of that stuff. All right, we're going to take a quick break right here, but don't go away. We'll be right back with a few other stories that are pretty darn interesting, so don't go away. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We were just talking about sort of my personal life of real estate, things I'm working on, things that I'm throwing into the wind and see what comes back. One interesting news item to comment on today is what we told you was going to happen happened. The Fed did hike rates by 0.25% on the 14th. Quote, it signified the Fed's confidence in the improving U.S. economy. Rising rates will affect millions of Americans, including home buyers, savers, and investors. Let's see. Fed officials raised its target for short-term interest rates by 0.25 percentage points to a range of 0.5 to 0.75, because remember, it had been raised to 0.25 by 0.25 already last December. This is just the second time in a decade that the Fed has raised rates. And of course, the first time was, as I mentioned a moment ago, in December of 2015. Now, we've already talked a little bit about, quote unquote, the confidence in the improving economy and how hollow some of that is. Obviously, we'll keep our eyes on it and see what happens moving forward. And as I told you would happen, the very first thing that happened as a result was a drop in the stock market. Not a huge one. It was, let's see here. Let's see, the Dow was down 118.68. The NASDAQ was down 27.6. I have to be honest, I was anticipating bigger drops than that, so that's actually not too bad. It actually did drop more than that after the announcement, but it did manage to do a little bit of recovering later in the afternoon. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of days. And remember, whenever stuff like this happens, the knee-jerk reaction is a little bit of a panic. So likely you'll see this kind of stuff hitting the stock market. We'll see how much more of an effect there is. I think there's potentially more to the downside in terms of this effect on the stock market. But in addition, you'll also see a momentary blip or increase in lending rates. We always do. We saw it last time. And what happened last time? Within 2 to 3 weeks, it had dropped back down to rates that were lower than what they were before the increase. So remember, we need to keep our eyes on the 10-year Treasury, not necessarily this number. And the weird blip we're going to see is simply a uncertainty response of folks thinking we need to increase it. And then it'll all sort of, I think, return down to the level we're used to now, or maybe even a little bit less. Now, here's an interesting contradiction, and there's plenty of them. We're going to talk about another one. No matter when you listen to these pundits, it makes it tough when you realize that they frequently contradict one another. So let's go with an interesting quote here. Let's see. The rate increase indicate that the U.S. economy no longer needs the Fed's crutches, and consumers and businesses can afford to pay more to borrow. All right. That's an interesting conclusion to come to. After all, we've been discussing about all of the bend over backwards techniques that Fannie, Freddie, and FHA are going to get more money lent out to people. There is clearly a desperate push to create more borrowers. If what the Fed here asserts is true, or what CNN is saying in relation to what the Feds did, it seems odd that so many incentives are having to be laid out to get people to borrow. What's also interesting is not only is that an interesting contradiction to what we're seeing relating to what the Fed is doing, it's an interesting contradiction to the net effect of what everyone's expecting of lending rates to go up. we're clearly not lending at the level that we think we should be lending because of all this emphasis we're putting on increasing the amount of money that's getting loaned to buyers of all different abilities, particularly folks at the bottom end who would normally not qualify. But with interest rates as low as they have been, that alone, you would think, given the recovery they say we're already enjoying, would have done it. Well, the reality is that it hasn't. And despite what you want to say about where we think we are with unemployment, the reality is that the jobs that have been created are not the I can buy a house kind of jobs. So I think the growth is that they're interpreting here is misleading. The quote unquote expansion of the economy that they're talking about is a lot more anemic than they're talking about. But again, you don't need to take my word for that. If you want to go out and Google this stuff, you're going to find an endless supply of intellectual fear relating to the claims out there relating to our economy versus what seems to be the reality. Now, the Fed went on to hint that it could raise rates at a faster pace next year. Most Fed officials now project 3 or more rate hikes in 2017. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Unless we start to see a downturn, which is always possible. In September, Fed officials predicted they would only raise rates once or twice next year. In my estimation, that's probably more realistic. Once or twice in 2017 is probably more realistic. Another interesting thing to note about the increase today is there were no dissenting voices on the board. We talked about how last time when they were discussing whether they would raise or not raise, they were not unanimous. I think 3 folks were saying, no, we can't raise these rates. This is not the time to do it. This time it was unanimous. So clearly they all agree that it's time to start getting these rates raised. So another question that sometimes comes up is, well, then maybe we shouldn't be raising rates if what you're saying is true, Robert. No, I'm sorry. While that may sound like a logical conclusion to come to, if you're the Fed, you kind of have to raise rates. You've been pushing this narrative that things are going well. But the reality is, if we're going to recover from the situation that we're in, we need to raise rates. It's likely going to cause bad things to happen, but it is the equivalent of economic chemotherapy. It may make you sick. It may make things painful for a long time, but ultimately it makes you better. And you just cannot leave rates down here like this for this long without it having a negative effect. I mean, the next thing they were thinking about doing, something that was on the table last year, was potentially going to negative interest rates. Another thing you could go and Google or check past shows I've posted where that's been a very bad thing. And it's been done in several countries in Europe, all over the place it's been done, and it's just bad. Remember those news articles we read last year from Greece about folks being charged money just right off the top of whatever they had deposited in the bank? Yet that's what happens with negative interest rates. They just take your money when it's in a savings account or in the bank to encourage you to spend it. That's a very bad thing, and it is basically one of the most amazing and blatant acts of desperation that you can see in any economic institution. And that's another reason why I love the idea of continuing to have cash, because if you're someone who believes that kind of stuff is potentially going to happen, and not because it's some weird, crazy out there tinfoil hat thing, but because you've seen what's happened in numerous other countries across the globe, going back to what great grandma and great grandpa did in terms of taking their cash and stuffing their mattress suddenly starts to make a lot of sense, because they can't tax or seize any of the money that you're actually holding once you've opted out of the banking system. So that's why the negative interest rate thing would be very bad for everyone. According to this, the stock market fell after the decision was announced and Yellen's new conference was underway. The Dow fell over 100 points. We already discussed that a little bit. Of course, I will include a link to this article from CNN. I'll also include a link to CNN Money for a quick overview of what was going on with the stock market, just so you can sort of get a view of your own. See if you agree with me. If you don't, that's cool. I'd love to hear back what your thoughts are on this. I occasionally get some folks out there who are even more pessimistic than I am, so it's always interesting to hear what y'all have to say about these things. Wednesday's move could be the first of more. Some economists believe the Fed will need to raise rates more often and perhaps at higher levels if President-elect Donald Trump spends big on infrastructure. And remember, he's already talked about spending $1.2 trillion. We were already sort of facing folks suggesting that was going to happen when we were listening to what candidate Clinton was saying in terms of what she wanted to do. She was talking about something in the neighborhood of an $800 billion infrastructure package. So this is a even larger spending package coming from the Trump administration's proposals. We'll have to see how that goes. Let's see. Quote, with the economy much closer to full employment now and strong likelihood of a fiscal stimulus next year, we expect the Fed to accelerate the pace of rate hikes next year, according to Paul Ashworth, who's the chief U.S. economist at Capital Economics. The Fed, quote, the Fed is clearly comfortable with how the U.S. economy is currently performing, says Scott Anderson, chief economist at Bank of the West in San Francisco. Even that's a bit of a stretch, I would say, since they only increased it by 0.25%. That's really about as low as they can do and still call it an increase. If they had felt as strongly as this article's trying to paint them, I think we would have seen more of a 0.5 or a 0.75 increase. So take it for what it's worth. In other news, another contradiction. Let's talk about another bizarre contradiction. One of the things we've been hearing about the millennials, we were hearing that they were all pushing for these mini homes, these just super tiny housing arrangements. We were hearing that first, a year ago, we were hearing that they were all going to stay in mom and dad's basement. But then within the last few months, everyone was saying they're coming out of the woodwork. The millennials are here and they're out there to buy. Well, apparently they're, and this is something I was kind of harping on, they want bigger houses. What a surprise. It ends up that your millennial buyer isn't that much different from every other group of buyers we've seen in the past. Are there going to be some variations? Sure. There's always some little deviations one direction or another with each group of buyers that come along that usually relate less to square footage related things and more to what they decorate that square footage with. But I thought it was super interesting that we had, and from the exact same outlet, this is realtor.org, the exact same folks that were telling us that all of the millennials were first, they're telling us the millennials making up the vast majority of folks who are coming out to buy. And that's great news. That's fine. But they were also telling us that these are the folks who wanted the little teeny houses. They wanted, and there was this supposedly big push that we should be telling all the buyers to build tiny homes for this generation of buyer. And what do we discover? That the vast majority of them are all looking for bigger square footage. Quote, buyers are continuing to purchase bigger homes this year, according to the National Association of Realtors. In 5 out of the 9 U.S. regions, buyers sought to trade up and buy bigger homes than last year. 46% of all buyers wanted to get sizes bigger than their current home. And that would include people who are renting at the time they're doing it. For whatever accommodation they had at the time, they wanted something bigger. As homeowners gain more equity, they may be looking to trade up for a bigger home. So far in 2016, sellers reported selling their homes for a median of $43,100, more than they purchased it. So what does that tell us? Well, if we're out there trying to figure out where buyers' interests are and we're trying to say, well, you know what, man, I'm in a city where millennials are supposed to make a huge chunk of the buying population. What do I need to be thinking in terms of satisfying what they want? You can think the same thing you've thought about most other generations. They still love bigger houses. So that's a nice one. As we move on, another thing that's kind of interesting to note is it was actually 6 months ago that I first mentioned a lot of the folks who were saying that the Amazon drone delivery program was ridiculous. I think I covered it with 2 different articles where they said, A, it's never going to happen. It's something that we'll never see. Here we are 6 months later, and Amazon has completed its first drone-powered delivery. They did it in Cambridge in the UK, but they have also gotten FAA licensing for doing it here in the United States. Here's what's amazing. It took 13 minutes from purchase to drop off. And this was to a real customer. So the company recently launched a trial in Cambridge, England. On December 7th, Amazon completed its first drone-powered delivery. It took 13 minutes from the time from the order was made to the delivery. And the drone departed a custom-built fulfillment center that was nearby. So what's interesting about this is yet another item that I think we can chalk up to things that are potentially going to impact the employment situation. Once Amazon is able to do things in this fashion, it is ridiculous to think that other delivery places, whether they are companies that specialize in delivering, whether we're talking about FedEx or UPS or anything else, it's silly to think that those folks are not going to implement the same thing. It may take time to implement the technology, but we've already talked about this idea where there was floated this idea from Amazon that they would automate the entire process, and it would blend several of the things we've discussed relating to how automation is going to replace various folks. You get a Amazon delivery van or a UPS delivery van or a FedEx delivery van. It pulls up to a warehouse where maybe there's still humans involved, but somehow it gets loaded with all of the packages that need to be delivered. They get scanned, they get put in a specific part of the vehicle or put in a specific order. And then within the vehicle itself, there are no human beings. This is an auto-driving vehicle, and it will go and drive and park itself at strategic locations. And then 4 drones that are docked on the top of the truck get loaded from below by an automated loading system in the truck to deliver these packages to different addresses. And imagine how this will go. Now, this is another one of those things where the service will be so much better than what we get now. It will be ridiculous. You will get a text message or an email where you get a photo of where that package is at your doorstep or in your backyard in case you were not home. You could actually tell the delivery company, where would you like these things to be delivered? Let's say you live in a neighborhood where in past years, your stuff was disappearing off of your porch. Well, now you can click a radio button on a preferences page, and the folks from FedEx and UPS and Amazon, or maybe the outlet where you purchased it, pass this information on with your purchase and shipping data to say, hey, don't put it on my front porch. Drop it in my backyard by the back door. As the thing drops it off there, it's all going to have optical systems on it. It takes a picture of where it dropped your box. It emails that off to you, and you know exactly the time and where that thing was dropped off on your property. The convenience level is going to get amped up to a level that we haven't been used to. So I don't see any kind of real resistance to it. It's not as if we are suddenly having to settle for a less satisfying service because the humans aren't involved. We never talk to those people anyway, right? I get home, I've got Amazon boxes on my front porch. I don't know how they got there. So I don't know the person who did it. But boy, does it represent a huge impact to those folks who work in those professions. I would say we were on the doorstep of just about 90% of those jobs going away. I think this stuff's going to happen relatively quick, and I think it's going to be a surprise when it tends to happen so quickly. So there was another update I wanted to hand out. That really covers it. You know, I had a couple of more. We're running a little bit long today, but I thought these were some very interesting insights relating to what the Fed's up to. Very interesting how, boy, have the experts called what was going to happen with millennials wrong. They're still facing some very unique things. They tend to be saddled with a lot more debt relating to college loans and things than previous generations, which are all going to have to get worked out. But I love how wrong they've been about what these folks are going to be preferring. And when it comes right down to it, it may feel trendy and hip to say, you know, I'd really love to live in a small house. And I've shown people houses where this has been kind of their mindset. And when they actually look at it and try to think about what they do in these spaces, it's like, you know what, I really need more room. So there you go. There isn't that much of a divide between us after all. We do tend to want a little bit more personal space. So let that be your guide, I think. The safe space for you in terms of an investor is if you're providing some space, if you're providing some elbow room, people are going to buy it. And clearly the numbers that we're seeing from the folks at Realtor.org are backing that up. So go ahead and provide away. You're gonna end up probably being a much more attractive offer or option for folks than any of those folks who thought the millennials were all looking for 600 square foot units. So there you go. All right, folks, thanks for listening. I truly appreciate that you are willing to spend your valuable time with me, and I hope that I'm able to, at least in some way, hand back some value with items to think about or things you can share in your next conversation with someone to make you sound like the smartest person in the room. Maybe a little. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.